Hello, welcome. Welcome. This is the global community for adults who are healing CPTSD. My name is Athena, and I'll be facilitating our time together tonight. And if you're new to our community, I just want to warmly welcome you. Your presence with us is felt and valued. Even if you're not able to be here during our weekly discussions here on Mondays at 7 p.m., I just want you to know that you're warmly welcome here. We are so glad that you have found us. Somehow, on all the interwebs, you found us. I'm so glad you're here. So we have all been gathering together here about once a week for over 11 years now. It's pretty wild, right? For those of you who have been along for this wild ride, a very special thank you to you. Very grateful to be right beside you on this healing journey. I know that it can be very painfully isolating and lonely. Trying to figure out, as one of our community members says, what even is CPTSD and how in the world are we healing it? I have no idea. So if that is you, please just know that I see you and you are not alone. And a very special thank you to John Harvey and Ninja Taco, our Blue Wrench crew. This be because of the two of you that our chat box is able to be a safe enough place for our community to gather week after week, month after month, year after year. And really just grateful. So this YouTube channel is made possible by you, our community, specifically those of you who have chosen to join us away from social media. I'll put a link in the chat box to our community if you would like to join us there. We have daily recovery support calls twice a day, every day, Monday through Friday. And then on Saturdays, we have trauma-sensitive yoga. We have a healing book club with someone in our community who's a licensed clinician. And on Sundays, we have weekly creative group. And it is an honor to be here with you. And if I see you over in our community away from social media, thank you. Thank you so much for being in our peer support chat group or in whatever part of the community you decide to be a part of. And if I don't see you, that's okay. I'll be back here next Monday and every Monday. Right here. And we'll continue to have our weekly discussion groups here. So we are on week 12 of our discussion about Pete Walker's most recent book titled Holistically Treating Complex PTSD, a Six-Dimensional Approach. And it has been really, really interesting and helpful to do a little bit of a deep dive into some of the topics that many of us have read about in his previous work, whether it be the grieving process or just the basics of the 4 F's. And specifically right now, what we have been sort of teasing apart is the idea of anger and how it helps us to establish and maintain healthy boundaries so that we can heal. Our boundaries give us freedom to heal by creating some guidelines around the relationships that we participate in our lives. And one of the specific areas of anger that facilitates our healing process that we're in the middle of discussing right now is verbal ventilation. And then the next part that we're going to talk more in depth about tonight is fully feeling our feelings and how that helps us to move through the painful emotions that we have, and the way that we can connect those emotions to the sensations that we're having in our body, and the difference between feelings and emotions. And for many of us, we really oftentimes do not know how to even be present in our bodies long enough to feel a feeling or understand what an emotion is or what's going on in the body, because so many of us have experienced so many different levels of dissociation due to the childhood trauma that we have been through. So it was brought to my attention recently that we talk a lot about healing CPTSD, and that there are so many different types of repeated relational trauma that can put someone in sort of the club that no one wants to belong to. No one asked to join this club. And so this particular YouTube channel, where you're at right now, through CPTSD Foundation, this will be most helpful for you if you are an adult who is healing from trauma that began in childhood, particularly within the context of your family of origin, where there was a high level of dysfunction, neglect, abuse, or exploitation. So I know that feels rather broad, but it is somewhat niche, and we could even go and we could even further, we could niche down even smaller if we needed to. But that is what this YouTube channel speaks most directly to: the lived experience of adults who are living with what they believe to be either diagnosed or undiagnosed CPTSD as a result of family of origin trauma beginning in childhood, typically early childhood or infancy, as a result of parents who were either addicts, alcoholics, or otherwise dysfunctional, neglectful, abusive, or exploitative. So I know, again, that might feel as though we're getting very, very, very specific. But there are so many other forms of trauma that could lead to the construct of complex PTSD. So wherever you find yourself in your journey right now, today, on September 1st, 2025, I just want you to know that we are here and we're right beside you. So as we enter this new month, many of you know, CPTSD Awareness Month, I want to pause and thank each of you for ordering wristbands. Thank you for all of your donations and for purchasing Awareness Day wristbands. If you're interested in purchasing a wristband for someone that you know or love, or for yourself, you can go to cptsdfoundation.org. And it would just be So such an honor for us to ship one out to you. Many of you know Matt, who has been with us since the very, very beginning, for almost 10 years now. And he and his wife packaged together all of our wristbands and send out thank you cards. And it's such a joy to know that so many of you are interested in raising awareness. And yes, thank you for your messages. Tomorrow is CPTSD Awareness Day, and we're getting ready to announce something pretty big. It will be our very, 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 very first in-person meetup, specifically on the topic of healing healing childhood trauma caused by narcissistically abusive parents. So it will be in January. Yes, Kitty, it's an in-person. It's a panel discussion. We'll be making the announcement tomorrow on CPTSD Awareness Day. It's in January 2026, and it's in Los Angeles, California. I'm pretty emotional about it and excited about it, and I'm also really nervous about it because I did try way back 10 years ago. We asked everyone in the community. I think there were 100 of us at the time. And everybody was on board and really excited about it and said they were really interested in coming. And we asked them, we even polled them and asked them how much tickets should cost and what should it be like. And we followed everything to the letter. And then when it came time to sell the tickets, because we had put out, a whole bunch of, I had put funds of my own, to reserve space and do all of the things. I think we sold 12 tickets or something like that. It was really, it was crushing. It was pretty demoralizing. So here we are, a decade later. We're actually doing it. And don't worry, there will be ways if you're unable to attend. If you're not able to attend live and in person, there will be ways for you to watch virtually or to attend virtually via a link that will lead you to the community that we have away from social media, and you would be able to attend in that way. So I see a lot of comments coming in about not being able to make it all the way to Los Angeles. It is really far away from pretty much everything, so I understand. I definitely understand. And it would really be incredible to meet even more of you in person. I've met so many of you in person just in my travels, being able to do road trips and stuff. So whether I've met you in a church basement or a park or a coffee shop or a Panera Bread or a gas station, trying to think of frozen yogurt, hotel lobby, Outback Steakhouse. I've met many of you in all sorts of different locations, and it was it's always instantly connecting and very humbling and pretty surreal to meet someone that you don't necessarily know in person, but you have everything in common with them because you have such a similar lived experience. So So yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and thank you all so much for being here for that announcement. We'll be announcing more tomorrow. And without further delay, I would like to, I want to read a tiny little blurb from last week, and then I want to check in with Kitty and everyone else. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we are on page, is it 302? I just want to make sure. Yes, thank you. Hello, family. Hello to so many of you. Oh my goodness. There's one little blurb I want to read before we start on page 302. But first, I want to just say hello to all of you that I see. Hello to Jeffrey Sherman, Candida, James, John Harvey, Marzui, Laura and Kate and Kitty, Brave Vanessa, Ninja Taco. Hello, Jen. Hello to anyone else I didn't greet by name. Hello, Nadine. Oh, you all are so amazing. Hello, Aurelia. Welcome, welcome. We warmly welcome you. Is this your first time here with us? We're so glad you're here. Hello to you, Kitty. Hello, Craig. Hello to anyone else I didn't get a chance to greet by name. So before we start on page 302, yes, and again, once again, a shout out to the Blue Wrench crew. Thank you, Jeffrey Sherman. I really appreciate you, Ninja Taco and John Harvey. So we are on page 302. I'm going to get a sip of water. Please allow yourself to be very, very comfortable. And I just want to get a sip of water before we begin. Yes, I'm with Kate. Welcome, welcome to any of the new family. You all are my family. You're my friendly family of choice. Everyone needs a friendly family of choice if you are here on this channel. Did I already post a link? I did. I hope I did. I know I pinned it. So in the description section of the video, there's a link to our community that is away from social media, off of social media. And here is a link in the chat box. And here we go. So just to recap from last week, we were talking about verbal ventilation and how when we are able to experience verbal ventilation, it really helps us with our abandonment. And Pete said a couple of things that were so very, very poignant and really just hit me really, really deeply, like in the heart, in the solar plexus, in it was so meaningful, and I've been sitting with it all week actually. So I know that I've shared with many of you how we've had open discussions here about how many complex trauma survivors have the experience of wanting to protect other people from the essence of us because we are afraid that we are going to harm them. Like we are afraid that we are black on the inside, find that whatever is in us is going to somehow get on them and it's going to harm them. And so it causes us to isolate further and to hide. And Pete captures the painful, isolating reality of that at the top of page 301, where he says, habitually hiding one's authentic self is a painful, lonely, self-abandoning symptom of untreated CPTSD. Many survivors come out of childhood believing that whatever they have to say is as boring and or dangerous to talk about as it was with their parents. Jung wisely quipped, "Our feelings tell us what is important to us." Therapists can save survivors from a lifetime of dejected loneliness and ungratifying pursuits by guiding them to share about what is emotionally important to them. This, of course, includes things that excite and please them, as well as things that trouble them. Such practice imparts to them the vitals of connecting with themselves and others in meaningful and healing ways. Verbal ventilation is a key tool with which people establish intimacy. Therapists can help survivors to develop their arrested capacity for intimacy by guiding and encouraging them to put words to their feelings, as well as to feelingly express their words. They can enhance safety in therapy sessions by using the warm, soothing voice and welcoming facial expressions that good enough parents routinely bestow on their infants, toddlers, and older children. Now, on the other hand, most survivors benefit from refraining from verbal and vulnerable ventilation with empathyless people. Being shamed for our vulnerability can destroy our gains and growing confidence in being authentically vulnerable. Psychoeducation about repetition compulsion and recognizing narcissists can help survivors to discern who is too unsafe to trust. And finally, being vulnerable can easily trigger survivors into flashbacks. They may have flashbacks to past traumas around showing their pain, even when their therapist is wholly benevolent. With enough practice, therapists can learn to recognize this when it happens, even when it is not overly expressed. Therapists can then work to repair trust by reminding clients that they especially value their vulnerability and that they might be in a flashback. And if that is the case, they can then help the client work through the flashback as described in the theoretical neuroscience section that we just talked about last week. Therapists can also elicit clients about whether something they said or did triggered their flashback. And if this is the case, they can then clarify and or apologize for what they said. They can also work through the disruption of trust with the client by exploring the possible transference of the client. Guidance for accomplishing this is provided in the transference section in the earlier part of the chapter that we talked about a couple weeks ago. And such inquiry becomes especially therapeutic when and if the therapist realizes that their countertransference caused them to do or say something unempathic. They can then model the all-important process of apologizing for their mistake. The Chapter 2 section, Collaborative Rapport Repair, illustrates the verbal and emotional mechanics of this process. So we are going to review Chapter 2 after we complete the section that we have on verbal ventilation and intimacy, and the section on fully feeling, when we are talking about facilitating somatic repair and development, which is the next chapter, we're going to be talking about the juxtaposition of what the healthy or good enough family is like versus what many of us experienced, and why it is so important for us to be able to be fully present in our bodies. And then Pete gives us some self-support techniques for increasing body awareness, like how we are able to remain present in the body and know what's actually going on in the body. And he has a really cool, very easy guided process on how to do that. Because so many of us, because we experienced such betrayal and abandonment from our family of origin, we only know how to betray and abandon ourselves because that's what was modeled for us. So we can try to do and participate in learning about inner child work, but once that younger part of us or those younger aspects of self are awake and in need of care and nurture and protection, many of us don't know how to provide that nurture and protection, because what we experienced was neglect, abuse, abandonment, and trauma. And so we're left to sort of reparent ourselves without the tools. So that's what Pete is showing us how to do here, so that we are not stuck in a flashback regarding our original abandonment, and then through no fault of our own, not knowing how to not abandon ourselves, we learn how to be fully present. So it helps us to become aware of what's going on in the body. And he addresses some really important concerns about the anxious presentation and especially the depressive presentation of CPTSD, that will help us to be able to recognize what's going on in the body. And as soon as we complete that chapter, which will probably be in just a few weeks, before we dive into any type of spiritual abuse that has gone on in the community and ways in which we can repair that, we're going to go back to chapter 2, and we're going to talk about facilitating relational repair and development, because so many of you have reached out and talked about how you would really love to know how to even repair those things that are going on for you, personally and interpersonally. So I'm so glad that we're having these important discussions. It really is so healing. So here we are. We are at page 302, and we're talking about verbal ventilation and intimacy. And before we move forward, let me just get my glasses. Let me just check on you. Hello, Skylight at Dusk. Welcome, welcome. So glad to see you. Hello to anyone else I didn't get a chance to greet by name. Oh, my chat box is freezing. Darn it. Well, I had a feeling, but I didn't get a chance to warmly welcome all of you. So for those of you I didn't get a chance to greet by name, we warmly welcome you to our community. We've been here about once a week or so for 11 years, and we are healing trauma. We are healing CPTSD. I'm just going to get a sip of water, and then we'll go ahead and we'll continue reading on. I do believe Nadine gave us a link for a free download of the book, and I thought I had it here, and I don't. So for those of you who have the book already, we're on page 302 toward the bottom, and Pete is talking about verbal ventilation and intimacy. And he says, reciprocal verbal ventilation is an interstate highway to intimacy in adult relationships. Sufficient practice with a safe enough other brings genuine experiences of comforting and restorative connection. When therapists consistently elicit the verbal ventilating of survivors who have never felt seen or heard by anyone, they often provide them with their very first experience of feeling the abatement of their loneliness and alienation. As a reminder, Chapter 3, which we covered, I think, 10 weeks ago, Chapter 3 details how therapists can use their own vulnerable self-disclosure in a safe, ethical, and limited way to model the intimacy that comes from vulnerable, reciprocal, verbal ventilation. This can then initiate survivors into the wondrously healing process of commiseration, whereby two intimates are reciprocally sympathetic to each other's troubles and difficulties. Again, commiseration is the deepest, most intimate human channel of intimacy. It is even more profound than sex because of its potential to connect two people on all 6 dimensions of their being. This is also true because commiseration often opens both people into many levels of lighthearted and spontaneous connecting, as is explored in greater depth in the commiseration section of Chapter 3. As deep and meaningful connection with another becomes more available and frequent, survivors increasingly experience the shrinking of their abandonment depression. I cannot help reiterating here that some popular bodywork approaches to trauma belittle the usefulness of talk therapy, and while somatic work is a vital tool of recovery, it rarely heals the relational impoverishment of developmental trauma and CPTSD survivors, nor does it shrink the inner critic and toxic shame unless it is combined with trauma-informed talk therapy. Similarly, somatic therapy alone cannot restore survivors' capacity to trust another person, nor can it resuscitate the innate multidimensionality of a survivor's full self-expression. I believe the same limitation applies to cognitive and behavioral work that is not empowered by encouraging and welcoming survivors to fully explore and grieve out the unprocessed pain of their grievous losses in childhood. Over the last 4 decades, I have repeatedly noticed in both my professional and personal relationships that as mutual vulnerability and authenticity grow, so does the depth and meaningfulness of the conversations in which I participate. Over the years, I also increasingly note a gratifying cycle occurring whereby my conversations with proven intimates often spontaneously begin with us mutually processing each other's stressful issues. And then, when commiseration aids both of us to soften into the relief of well-being, our dialogue often naturally shifts into sharing what we feel excited and grateful about. I would like to have the proverbial $1 for every therapy session that I have been that I have been in that started in the swamps of the abandonment melange and morphed into a light-hearted exchange in the territory of glad to be alive. I just want to pause and bask in the beauty and the truth of that last section when he says, I would like to have the proverbial $1 for every therapy session that I have been in that started in the swamps of the abandonment melange and morphed into a lighthearted exchange in the territory of glad to be alive. I just want to share with each of you that if that feels like a faraway land, if that feels too out of reach for you, if you find it difficult, if not nearly next to impossible to believe that you could find a connection with another human being or therapeutic resource of any kind where you would experience what Pete is describing here, I beg you to not stop looking. Please don't give up. I feel so fortunate, blessed, and grateful that I have found this place with you all, my friendly family of choice. And I feel so fortunate, blessed, and grateful that after many, many, many attempts at connecting therapeutically with a clinician, I did find my person over 8 years ago, Sonia. Many of you have heard me talk about her here a lot. It's not that I didn't connect with other therapeutic relationships. I absolutely did, and they were, for the most part, beneficial. But when you find your person, when you find your a secure attachment within the context of a therapeutic relationship that is appropriately boundaried and remains appropriately boundaried, it can truly be life-giving, hope-giving, life-saving, life-giving. And I want you to know, if you're not there yet, you're not alone. And again, I'm so glad you're here. Okay? So this section here that we're going to complete tonight is all about fully feeling. And I just want to pause and acknowledge that many of us, we arrive here together every week, and we are, for the most part, present, and yet sometimes we talk about really painful truths and difficult topics and things that are not very socially acceptable. And so occasionally we dissociate, we float away, we check out. And there is no shame in that. There's absolutely no shame in that. I think I was pretty much dissociated for the better part of a decade. And I know what that's like. It really speaks to the level of just constant, chronic unsafety that I was experiencing. And if you ask a fish what the water's like, the fish isn't going to know what the water's like. The fish doesn't know it's swimming in water. If any of you had asked me along the way during that decade how I was doing, or if I felt unsafe, I don't think I could have named it. I don't think that my lack of safe enoughness was something that I was consciously aware of. I don't think I was conscious about it. I think much of it was unconscious. And I think that for many of us who grow up in chronic, daily neglect dysfunction, abuse, exploitation, whatever form that takes, when you land yourself in a situation or a relationship or a reality that lasts a decade or longer, or, and it's not exactly like what you grew up in fact, to you, it feels pretty amazing because it hurts less. But if you're committed to this path and you're on a healing journey, there may come a time in your life when you look around and realize that what you thought was amazing might have just been barely safe enough. You might have not necessarily been experiencing the level of safety that you thought you were experiencing. You might look around and realize that what you thought was belonging was really more like fitting in. And it might happen that you look around and realize that what you thought you were experiencing felt like maybe self-confidence or even self-worth, but then you look a little closer and you realize that there wasn't that much safe enoughness. There really wasn't belonging. And you know what? I'm worthy of safety. I'm worthy of belonging. I am worthy of more. And those might feel like faraway guideposts or signs that you aren't quite there yet. And that's okay too. But wherever you are, I just want you to know that you're here in this place right now with all of us. And we are all so glad you are here. And we will do whatever we can here every single week to assure that each and every one of us can, as often as possible, arrive in this place, experience what it feels like to be seen and heard and valued and understood, to feel that safe enoughness, to feel like they belong, so that you can walk away having experienced that felt sense of empathy, knowing that you're worthy of that. And if I ever forget to say so, I know that Jeffrey Sherman will remind us at the end that we are worth it, that we deserve to be extra kind and patient and gentle with ourselves, that we are worth that. So, I was going to say I'm not really sure what put me up on that soapbox to go off on that tangent, that very tangential rant, but I'm pretty sure I know what it was. It's because Pete is getting ready to school us on fully feeling and working through emotional pain. And I just want each of you to know that wherever you find yourselves, whatever level of pain you're at right now, whether you're at a 1 on a pain scale or you're on a 12 out of 10, you are welcome here. And here we go. He starts with 2 quotes here on page 304. Feeling is the antithesis of pain. The more pain one feels, the less pain one suffers. End quote. That is a quote by Arthur Janoff. And the second quote that Pete shares here is an anonymous quote that says, "What you can feel, you can heal." And I know many of you remember when we started this channel, If you're ever going to heal, you got to feel all your feels. You got to feel all your feels if you're ever going to heal. I think that was right after I had read Pete's book titled The Tao of Fully Feeling. I'm pretty sure that's where that rant had originated. So Pete says, ongoing engagement in the active grieving process of angering, crying, and verbal ventilation naturally opens survivors to discover the fourth grieving process, and that is fully feeling. Feeling is a subtler, more passive process than emoting. It is best illustrated by contrasting the concepts of emoting and feeling. Emoting is when survivors cry, anger out, or verbally vent the energy of an inner emotional experience. Feeling, on the other hand, is the inactive process of staying acceptingly present to internal emotional experience without reacting. Feeling is surrendering to internal experiences of pain or sensations of discomfort without judging, resisting, or emoting them out. Let me highlight here, however, that feeling can also naturally open the door to healthy emoting in an especially therapeutic way. Therefore, as survivors learn to grieve effectively, exercises on developing their feeling function should welcome any spontaneous shift into actively emoting. Feeling is a kinesthetic rather than a cognitive experience. Feeling is the process of shifting the focus of one's awareness away from thinking and onto one's affects, energetic states, and sensations. It is the proverbial getting out of your head and getting into your body. As a grieving process, feeling involves consciously reversing the learned survival mechanism of clamping down on pain to banish it from awareness. Feeling occurs when the survivor directs their attention to an uncomfortable emotional or physically painful state and surrenders to its experience without resistance. With considerable practice, survivors can learn to relax acceptingly into their pain and gently absorb and dissolve it with their consciousness. Feeling then functions as if one's awareness is a solvent that dissolves and metabolizes their affects and sensations of their emotions. Not infrequently, this process is accompanied by insight into the source and meaning of the affect. There is often a close relationship between emotion and physical sensation. Physical sensations in the body often co-occur with feelings. This is especially felt in the sensations of tightness and tension that can develop as a defense against feelings. As unexpressed feelings accumulate, muscular tension can mount to keep them under wraps. Children who are repeatedly punished for emoting learn to be afraid of their inner emotional experiences. They learn to tighten or armor the musculature of their bodies to hold their feelings in. They unconsciously strive to banish their feelings lest they slip out and infuriate or otherwise alienate their parents. Holding one's breath is a further manifestation of armoring. It is an especially common way of keeping feelings at bay, as breathing naturally brings one's awareness down into the level of feeling. Here's an example of this. As my client, Kylie, free associated on the feelings of an intense flashback, she painfully recalled the traumas she underwent trying to avoid her mother's punishments for crying. Her sorest memory was of the day in a supermarket when her mother's scolding rained down upon her. Feeling panicky, she tried mightily to suppress her surging urge to cry, knowing that even worse punishment would be meted out if she cried. I strangled my breath to hold back the tears. I held it so long that I fainted from lack of oxygen and cracked my head open on the floor. My mother was so mortified by this public humiliation that she beat me black and blue when we got home. It took us 2 years of trust-building work to bring this incident back into awareness. And as she reported it, she cried her first tears since it happened. 3 decades earlier, these also became the first tears she had that had ever brought her relief. Happily, she went on to have many more therapeutic experiences of crying as her inner self-compassion steadily bloomed. Therapists can teach survivors to focus their awareness on the physical sensations in their alimentary canals to help them connect with their feelings. With enough practice, paying attention to tightness in one's face, jaws, throat, heart, belly, or groin area can bring feelings into awareness where they can be felt through and or healthily emoted. I often use this process to guide survivors to both feel and emote, and to verbally ventilate about their affective experience. Engaging each of the 4 key grieving processes in working through any specific trauma is especially therapeutic. An additional benefit from this practice is that survivors gradually become more present, grounded, and relaxed in their bodies. And then there's a footnote here. Pete says, readers may want to revisit the scripts for 2 guided feeling exercises in the earlier section, guided mindfulness to elicit emoting. Remember, we talked about that about 6 weeks ago. You can go back and listen to the replay if you would like. And then Pete continues here on balancing feeling and emoting. We're at the top of page 307, and he says, when survivors become more mindful of the subtle sensations of their feelings, the passive grieving process of feeling through their effects can complement their abilities to actively grieve them out. And in the next chapter, there's much more about how the practices of grieving can become talents that ripen both emotional and somatic intelligence. In advanced trauma recovery, survivors can both emote out and or feel through their loneliness, anger, sadness, fear, shame, and or depression. Grieving is especially transformative when survivors can fluidly shift between feeling and emoting. Sometimes survivors will only need to fully feel and accept the sensations of their emotional pain. Other times, they will benefit most from verbally ventilating their pain with someone who gives them full permission to emotionally charge their words with angering and tears. That's very important. I don't want us to miss that part. That last sentence, someone needs to hear that again. I'm going to read that last sentence again. Pete says, other times, survivors will benefit most from verbally ventilating their pain with someone who gives them full permission to emotionally charge their words with angering and tears. Now I'm going to pause right there before we read the very last part before we end tonight. And I want to tell you something funny. So I have a colleague of mine, and we meet a couple times a week, and she's one of the volunteers at the foundation, CPTSD Foundation, and she and I have given one another full permission to anger if we need to anger and use whatever words necessary. And I gotta tell you, sometimes my vocabulary is quite colorful. I know some of you are not surprised by that because you've heard me cuss up and down and just really go on some mama bear rage rants here on this channel. But I gotta tell you that she has coined this, the funniest thing in the world. She says, oh boy, Athena is about ready to cuss herself happy. And I gotta tell you, the first time she ever said that, I nearly peed my pants. I was laughing so hard. And it's true. Like, occasionally, you just gotta let it all out. When you know that you are in the presence of someone that is not gonna judge you for not sounding prim, proper, professional, and perfect, but yet, on the contrary, they hold that space for you to be as colorful in your collaborative process as need be, right? I am allowed and encouraged to cuss myself happy when we are having our bi-weekly meetings. And I gotta tell you, it's been a game changer for me. Our organization has found ways to reach more survivors in more places with less resources, more in the last few months than we had in the previous year. And I give a lot of the credit to the fact that I have a team in place, I have people in place that are not expecting me to be this prim, proper, perfect, professional leader, but yet they know that when you are in the trenches of your own healing journey and all you want to do is help people, sometimes you just got to cuss yourself happy. So I don't know who needed to hear that, but I got to believe someone needed to hear that. So whomever it is in your life that holds that space for you and allows you the space and the grace to cuss yourself happy, if that happens to be something that you enjoy or need, I want to celebrate whomever is out there in the world right now. And maybe you're one of those people that shows up in the most beautiful, profound, non-judgmental, fully accepting way where others know they can come to you, and if they need to cuss themselves happy, they can. And you're not going to judge them, and you're not going to shame them for not sounding prim, proper, professional, and perfect. Because I got to tell you, there is a time and a place for us to be prim, proper, and professional, and there is a time and a place for someone to allow us to cuss ourselves happy. Because there are certain things that just need an effing expletive. And I really just cannot emphasize that enough. So, in closing tonight, we are going to read the very last section on the bottom of page 307, We're going to end on 308, and this is a section that Pete has titled More on Learning to Feel. Pete says, as survivors become more adept at angering and crying, their fear and shame about their feelings progressively decrease. This, in turn, aids them to attune to and metabolize their emotions simply by feeling them. This usually occurs first with the sensations of their anger and sadness, and then eventually with the deeper and more troubling abandonment melange feelings of fear, shame, and depression. In the early developmental stages of emotional recovery, however, the subtle awareness of emotional sensations sometimes quickly and healthily morphs into actively emoting them out. Later, with enough time and practice, survivors can increasingly learn to digest and work through their abandonment melange feelings purely with the solvent of their awareness. In other words, they can mediatively feel their way through the fear and the shame and the depression of a flashback. This often rewards them with the relieving insight that feeling their feelings does not drive them crazy or send them on a rampage. This progression also applies to metabolizing the sensations of anxiety, which is often fear just below the level of awareness. This process will be explored more extensively in the next chapter. When survivors become proficient at feeling, they begin to experience that a once hard to accept feeling comes to them more easily, like a weather front passing through, remarkably easy, as they feel through it, emote it, verbally vent it, and or no longer react against it. Finally, the development of this fourth grieving process of feeling also naturally evolves into a type of body work, somatic work, that enhances their somatic intelligence. The practice of focusing on feelings aids survivors to increasingly experience full, relaxed, and vital inhabitancy of their bodies, as is further explored in the next chapter. So next week, we are going to talk about somatic repair and development. And we're going to be on page 309. I want to just check. Let me get my glasses. I want to just check and see if Brave Vanessa or Kitty or Brenda or someone is going to be here so that I know where I'm at. How are you all doing? Hello, this be me. Long time no see. So happy. So happy to see you as always. Thank you, Kitty. You'rethebomb.com. Thank you. Page 309. Hi. I'm waving at you all. Thank you so much for being here. So again, if you missed it, oh, that's okay, Kitty. If you're not here, that's okay. If you're not, no pressure. There's never any pressure. Thank you, Brave Vanessa. You'rethebomb.com. I appreciate you all. If I type it with my fingers, then I will remember it. 309. Boom. There. We're going to start next week on 309. I'm going to remember it now. So, so we're going to announce more tomorrow about the in-person meetup on healing CPTSD in January of 2026 in Los Angeles, California. there will be a way for you to attend virtually. And I look forward to telling you more about that tomorrow on CPTSD Awareness Day. And again, a very special thank you to each of you who have purchased CPTSD awareness wristbands. If you'd like to join our community away from social media, you can do so here. And if you would like to purchase a CPTSD awareness wristband in honor of CPTSD Awareness Month, you can do so here. Uh-oh, where did it go? Let me find it. There we go. Thank you all so much for being here. I'll see you over in our community away from social media, and if I do not, that's okay. I will be here with you next Monday and every Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern. And in the meantime, until I see you again, please be extra kind and patient and gentle with yourself, because you're worth it. And I do look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Good night, everyone.